David May taking time to answer your questions. David May taking time. He's a busy guy.
Steven, is he sleeping?
Yeah, it does look like that.
Dave! Dave, wake up! Dave, people have questions!
Oh, no.
Rise and shine, Mr. May.
Hi!
Is this a dream? Why did I give you my number? It's a beautiful day, man. I'm just taking a nap.
Yeah, but like people have questions, Dave. I can't help that.
They have questions, and
If it's for the people, we've covered this. I can't say no to the people.
Yeah.
Okay.
There you go. Hey, all right. Hey, do you remember that Lynette interview that we did recently?
Yeah, the one where you blew up my iPad?
Yeah, it's not on me, man. That is not, right? Read the fine print. I was excited, obviously, to see that you found Lynette. I don't know if you ever found cookies, but you found Lynette.
Yeah.
So.
No, we're still working on the cookies.
I found some cookies.
They're good.
I found some cookies. So when we talked to Lynette, she talked about, back in 97, 98, when, that place you worked for was shutting down, that there was another game, like you guys were trying to like simplify, like,
well, again, I want
X-Files, right?
I want to first start by saying thank you again for reminding me of the shutdown. What happy memories. And then as far as what we were doing at the time, we had a game rewrite, but truth be told, right, that wasn't anything necessarily new. That story actually begins kind of pretty much shortly after Premiere launched. And as you know, there was a lot that happened with the launch of the X-Files. And one of the things that was kind of taking place also in the background was the fact that, again, the United States Playing Card Company had acquired the distribution, the rights to the X-Files from Donruss. And this was new to them, right? Their only experience up to that point was that, I guess secretly, they had printed some Magic, the Gathering cards, which is kind of a whole nother story. But ultimately, that led them to be interested in collectible card games. And having acquired the title and everything that was taking place, it had always been intended to kind of work on a mass product. Maybe something, at least at this point now, a little more simplified. And of course, back then the show was still gaining popularity. We weren't at the zenith of popularity yet. So people might not be familiar with the complexity of a game which simulates an episode of the X-Files TV show. So they always wanted to simplify it into a two-player set. And obviously a lot happened between 97 and that, right? Then there towards the end, the desire was definitely to get that simplified mass product. And so Brian and another gentleman who's really never been, I don't think, named on this show, Darren, and I just ruined that. They were obviously looking on how we could simplify it, and I guess Lynette managed to hang on to that. It blows my mind how all these people were able to get all this stuff out of the company. All these people hung on to all this stuff all these years. There should have been security involved. At least I know when I was fired, there was security involved, but nah.
I was gonna say.
Well, we know when Brian left, he got some awesome stuff, and I have here a binder that still shows original sticky notes from cards that were actually being like changed. And you'll notice Deep Throat. By the way, I didn't mention this, but if you look right here, this card. Whoops, where am I going? Wrong way. This card literally just has Deep Throat written on it. Okay, you know what that means? That means back in the day when Matt and I couldn't even get a Deep Throat, you couldn't even get a Deep Throat.
No, that just meant he stole it for his own deck.
So Lynette had sent us proposed rewrites for about, I think it was 135 cards. Was your plan, Mr. May, to do, 354, 355 for the completed
If I knew me, my plan would have been, if there is a future, I would start with smaller sets and then continue to trickle cards out. Because you got to remember, when we moved from Premier to second edition, obviously simplification was taking place. Killer cards had already been removed, right? Mm-hmm. So we were already looking at what can we do to kind of, simplify or take some of the complexity out, streamline it, possibly regain balance, because we were going to have, not only was Mulder already out, but Scully set, right? So we would have tried to more evenly spread card revisions, simplifications, and then further updates in order just to have an easier rollout. Because things did move really quick there at the beginning. I think I've mentioned for me that the checklist, the adversaries, right? It was hard for me to imagine additional seasons where you were going to have now a list of 80 of them. Choose one from 80 X-Files, not adversaries, but X-Files, right? Let me guess now with that poll, right? Now we'd have real marathon games. So, that's what I would have hoped I would have done. I would have continued to release cards in the simplified format in small batch, and then caught us back up so that we could move into the future.
So what about, and let me pull this down here, this question specifically. It says, generally speaking, what sort of game effects or mechanics were you dialing back? So can you think of like an example? Because I know combat can be very difficult. It was probably something that was going to be more simplified. Can you tell us anything about
it's always been around the keyword activators
from the game that was.
So wishful thinking, I'm trying to think how many believer cards there were, skeptic cards there were. Again, there was a lot of stuff for the future. I think we've all had fun now with the field office. The future, whatever the future was. So taking away some of the redundancy. It's cool having cards with lots of card effect, right? Lots of text, but obviously it's intimidating. So just seeing, again, if there were ways to simplify,
mm-hmm.
A lot of that is solved actually within the turn itself, within the sequence of play. Briefing, debriefing. You're really only doing things in certain times in certain places. So yeah, that was a biggie, if my memory serves me correct.
Yeah, and it appears that the activator portion of the card was being replaced with a phase indicator to express what phase of the round this card is intended to be. I
remember, I think we sat down and again, the brain trust at the time, we just kind of looked at each other because we were the only ones left in the room and just said, do we have redundancy? Is there something redundant here that we can remove?
It's interesting that something that we learned recently was Brian provided us with photos of like the test card Langley that shows like a super simplified version. I'm sure we'll throw up a picture here. And I had thought, and I think Stephen, you had thought too, we were under the assumption that that was actually like an original version of the game, like it was something back before, Premiere and all that stuff, and then all of a sudden come to find out, no, that's actually what the simplified version of that was kind of going to look like. But in regards to the other types of cards, did you keep combat? Combat
I
cards
want to say we were going to try to salvage the combat. Yeah. To be honest, it's a big chunk. Even though only 4 or 5 cards would ever see the light of day, because you would have to combo them. Yeah, I know my intent. Like I said, that, get this product out, and then you can re-release. Sounds so crazy, but now we have combat. Whoa, we can do more. But when you only have 3 or 4 cards, like I said, things needed to be engineered, or a layered approach. I don't know if there was a science back then to writing these things. Like I said, we've learned a lot. If we had to write a collectible card game now, I'm sure we would do it differently.
Yeah, because there weren't any combat cards amongst the 135 that Lynette sent us. So yeah, that was a question we were wondering, is whether or not combat was
and if I agreed to kill it,
included in,
I would have tried to bring it back in some other application of event. Right? I will argue with myself now. This me will argue with that old me if that was not my intent. But again, in that moment, we needed a 2-player mass product. Right? We needed something we could put in a box, and get on a shelf. Especially to someone who is just getting into the show, right? I mean, that's always the balance. You either got into this because you're a fan of the show, or you got into this because you enjoyed collectible card games. If you go back and you look up the reviews of the game, it's a mixed bag, right? But if you look at people who are fans of the show, it did what it was supposed to do. People originally were not happy about the clue. I thought it was brilliant. I thought it was, great. You gotta guess the X-File, right? But again, it was so outside the box, right? But that's outside the box to what? Someone who's playing Guardians.
Yeah.
So.
So, judging from like the line art that Lynette had sent us, it looks like the overall appearance of the cards would have remained intact. But I mean, these are just early mock-ups. But to your recollection, was the plan to keep the cards familiar aesthetic, or were they intended to be like noticeably different from?
No, I definitely would keep the aesthetic. No reason to rebuild that. My opinion was that ultimately where NLS ended, with the overall card design, again, with the guidance of next games, was where the game needed to be. Some people thought it was cluttered, but no, that's the desk, right? This was the right aesthetic. That did not need to change. And remember, we're still dealing with an approval process. And if it's been approved, you don't want to change anything that needs to go back for approval. So that should also be pointed out. What we're doing here is what was already approved. The images were approved, the words were approved, the icons were approved.
Fair enough. And had the end of the actual CCG not happened, was there still plans to continue using cards like from the 1013 set?
Yeah, I think in the hope that the product continues. Again, now I can't address what was going through anybody else's mind. I mean this in absolute reverence and affection, right? At the time, I'm it. I hate to put it in those terms. There's nobody left. So other than a couple guys to argue with me, Brian and Darren, it's how bad can I screw it up? But the desire, if I remember what was going through my head, whether I was articulating it or not, would have been to continue. And we would have crossed those bridges. We would have tried to create the necessary space for future editions. Maybe we would have had to do some kind of season modular thing. I don't know. I don't know if I had thought that far, but I had to leave wiggle room so that we could do just that. We could show that we had product, because here would have been the reality. If it had gone into Walmart and it sold, obviously we would have made more product. And I don't care who likes who or doesn't like who. If money is flowing, if royalties are being paid, right, we're getting approval. We're making more cards. We're doing more seasons. It would have been beyond my comprehension that they would have shut us down on principle with checks being cashed. But at that point, we were stagnated. And if we can't get to Walmart, the United States Playing Card Company does not have any motivation to continue to sell niche product. And that's a different subject, because this is life before really Pokemon. And so Magic is dominating and is one of the only successful crossovers into mass. You don't have a bunch of other games, and if they do make it there, it's in limited distribution through third party. Nothing against Legends of the Five Rings, so there's no hop yet. You even have Star Wars and Star Trek out at that time, and I would say even if you looked at their numbers, they're not getting into mass. And so for the United States Playing Card Company, this opportunity is always mass, and they can see WotC numbers. They can see what the market will bear. It's interesting when you compare the X-Files franchise maybe to those other franchises. So I think I answered the question. I could be dreaming. I was sleeping.
All right. Well, let's let this man get back to sleep, and we'll see him again real soon.
Maybe Mike got to sing you a lullaby.
Rock-a-bye, David, in the treetop, when in blood the cradle will rock.
David May, taking time to answer your questions. David May, taking time. He's a busy guy.
Sounds like he's got a deviated septum.